Welcome to the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin, where we unpack the strategies and solutions that make localization fast, scalable, and efficient. I'm your host, Stefan Huyghe. Good morning here at the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin. We have a very, very special edition this morning because although we're separated by an ocean and then some, it's an all-Flemish affair this morning. I have the great honor to host my good friend Jourik Ciesielski, straight from Flanders. Twee Bellen. Remember that? Are you a little bit too young for that? That was a famous band back in the day, and it's two Belgians that are doing this episode. Jourik, go ahead and introduce yourself in a nutshell so the audience knows why I invited you here this morning.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for having me on the show today. The pleasure is all mine. Yeah, my name is Jourik Ciesielski. I wear a couple of hats in the localization industry. I'm currently the CTO for Yamagata Europe. We are a mid-sized LSP based in Ghent in Belgium, as you already mentioned. Apart from Yamagata, I'm also the co-founder and the owner of my own company, CJ International. Under the umbrella of my own company, I provide three big services: language technology consulting, localization engineering, and market research. And I think that's everything you need to know about me, apart from the fact that we speak the same language.
That's right. We can switch to Dutch if it gets too hairy, but let's stick to English for the time being. The reason I wanted to invite you is to talk about the future of localization and future-proofing our careers. It's a very, very timely topic. Let's talk about some trends and innovations to watch. I'm going to start right away, put your feet to the fire a little bit. Let's talk about AI, since we haven't talked about that for a while. How do you see it evolving in the localization industry over the next 5 years, Jourik?
Good question. First of all, I really believe that GenAI and LLMs have a lot of potential and bring a lot of opportunities to our industry. On the flip side, I am afraid that the real implementation, the real breakthrough of GenAI in our technology and our workflows is going to be a little bit slow. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. And, there are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, our industry is a little bit known for being reluctant to change. We don't like impactful changes. We're a little bit hesitant when trying new things. You also know I'm a market researcher. I analyze a lot of technology, and when looking under the hood of different GenAI features, it often makes me feel like, hey, we have GenAI, but that's it. Like, the true business impact of those features is overall relatively low, according to me so far. I hope that changes in the near future. And another reason for this slow implementation, according to me, is that within our industry, we tend to believe that AI is here to write content for us and or translate content for us, which in a way is definitely true. But we can do a lot more than just writing and translating content. And that's something that we urgently need to realize as an industry. That being said, slow implementation, but as I mentioned, I think the potential is huge. I think the first thing that will happen, and that is happening already, is that we will take existing disciplines such as machine translation and uplift them, elevate them. I really think that now we have the necessary technological resources to make machine translation outputs better. There are different things you can do. Agentic workflows, I guess we will talk about those a little bit more today, maybe. But it's not just machine translation. I also spontaneously think about quality management, where I see huge opportunities for LLMs. I think about workflow management. I think we can really build very sophisticated processes with LLMs, with GenAI, processes that involve, source content optimization and content classification, fit for machine translation, yes, no, high risk, low risk. Content routing, this one goes live immediately, this one goes to the post editor, this one goes to the subject matter expert. Content repurposing, take my technical documentation and my release notes and build a blog post, something like that. I think you get the point. A lot of opportunities, and I think, I hope, I feel that we will see more of that in the coming 5 years.
Yeah, I just did a little piece yesterday about pre-processing content, and you touched on that a little bit as well. There's so much focus on having AI or LLMs involved after the translation, but I think there's probably just as much opportunity to involve it before we're even getting to localization to optimize the content and remove some of the bottlenecks or pitfalls that happen at the outset of the content. What other opportunities you think are there to make localization more efficient at this moment? Where do you see the biggest opportunities? Would probably be the best question.
Yeah. I've been preaching for more than a year now that our current algorithms for doing quality management are obsolete. And when I say current algorithms for quality management, I mean QA checks in our TMS, and I mean LQA checks. Let me maybe explain why I feel about it that way. So, first of all, the current algorithm for doing QA in the TMS, it's pretty rule based. There's the dot in the source, and the algorithm looks for a dot in the target. And if there's no dot in the target, we throw an error. That's not what we want. That's not what we need in the current
Yeah,
AI
that's
climate.
very static. That's very
It's
static
very
that way.
static.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And logical consequences of this is, first of all, false positives a lot, when the human needs to fight his or her way through hundreds, sometimes thousands of false positives. There's no context awareness, there's very little customization. That's not okay. Let's maybe take LQA as a second example. LQA, there's nothing wrong with LQA. It's beautifully standardized. The one thing about it is that it's fully human driven, right? Humans take care of LQA. And what are the consequences of humans driving processes? First of all, it takes time. Second, human judgment is not entirely unbiased either. Humans can have a bad day. Humans can have a bad judgment about a given translation as well. I say, let's stop doing that. Let's stop using LLMs for QA and LQA. Why? Because you can really talk to the model, and you can explain the model what quality means for you as an individual or as an organization. And you can give examples, you can give context, you can specify the criteria for judging something to be an error or not, etc. and so on. And on top of that, you can define what output you expect from that model. Do you want an error description, or do you want a pass-fail indication? Do you want a quality score? Do you want a combination? Do you want an automated correction? Everything is possible. So again, I've been preaching this for more than a year now. I think that is what we should start doing ASAP.
Yeah, what it reminds me of when you're talking about it in that way is that what you're describing, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, will let me try it nevertheless. What you're describing is essentially the creation of agents instead of static rules. Would you agree with that?
Well, agents is, of course, it's a buzzword. People like to talk about agents these days. And of course, the definition of an agent is an AI model that does something, one specific task, with one specific purpose in a fully autonomous, independent way. Yes, I see room for agents in our workflows. I think more important than the concept of agents, we should start realizing that it is perfectly fine to use AI models or AI techniques to, for example, evaluate human translations as well. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's not always AI for translation and then the human needs to work around the implementation of AI. No, it can be the other way around as well. Just the other day, I was in a presentation. I was giving a presentation, and one of my co-presenters asked the crowd the following question. A crowd of linguists, by the way. The question was, "What does annoy you the most about your work?" And the linguist had a very common answer. Well, common. They have the same answer. Let's put it that way. It was not machine translation quality. It was not even post editing rates. The answer was human linguists proofreading my work and trashing it with all kinds of preferential changes. And yes, I do agree with you that a QA agent driven by an AI model can do that first attempt of evaluating a translation, highlighting what could be right or wrong, and then giving it to the human for the final sign off. Absolutely.
Yeah. Since you are so deep into technology, I can't help but wonder how you feel about Crowdin's approach of AI integration to help businesses. What experience do you have with the Crowdin platform in that regard?
Well, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and just last week I did a post on TMS, and in my post I explicitly mentioned that according to me, Crowdin is driving the breakthrough of Gen AI in TMSs, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that the other players are doing a bad job, but Crowdin is doing things right and has the right philosophy. So the one thing that I like a lot about Crowdin is they don't take a feature or they don't take a model and put it in a black box and start charging a lot of money for it. No, they integrate the feature, they integrate the model, and then they give their users the necessary building blocks to, get started with those features. But the user is still in control. And that is something that I like so much about Crowdin. So when I look at Crowdin AI, I see a centralized prompt library where you can prompt yourself and pull in all kinds of context, including visual context, screenshots. Amazing, something that people often forget. LLM, sorry, can look at images as well. I see a genuine RAG integration, a genuine vector space integration. I see AI agents that can autonomously do proofreading. I think Crowdin is doing things right. I think Crowdin is doing things properly. And yes, I'm pretty excited about how they approach the whole Gen AI implementation in the TMS market.
Awesome. That's really good to hear. What do you think are the biggest challenges we have in our industry to balance human oversight with AI automation, or beyond that particular issue? What are the biggest challenges as such for our industry currently?
So when it comes to, the human involvement, that is, of course, a hot topic. First of all, last week I was in a webinar, and one of the questions was, how do we deal with the man versus machine dilemma? It's not a dilemma. Man and machines can live together in localization workflows. And yes, depending on the use case or on the project, you have to put them in the balance, and the man might have more weight than the machine or vice versa. But the two can perfectly coexist in localization workflows. What I do believe is that the role of the human in localization workflows needs to change if we're serious about Gen AI implementation. I mean, human linguists will still translate and they will still open their preferred CAT tool and use their translation memories and do translation projects. But I think that other tasks need to be added to the portfolio of the human linguist. And that might be the biggest challenge because, again, we are reluctant to change and we might be a little bit resilient to accept that. But just to give you one example, we all know that LLMs, they want one thing. They want instructions. They want you to tell what it has to do and what it's not supposed to do. And no one in the localization industry is better positioned to read instructions, follow instructions, and write instructions, human linguists. So the whole prompt engineering thing, I do see an important position for human linguists. Human linguists there. There's maybe another thing that is important in the balance between man and machine. It's accountability. What do I mean by that? If you implement AI, for example, let's take one example. Let's take MTQE as an example, machine translation quality estimation. You basically score your translations, and when the score is high enough, you sign them off. If not, you do a retry or you send them to the human linguist. Why do you send them to the human linguist? Because the human linguist is still or can still be held accountable for a mistake, whereas you cannot hold an AI model accountable for a mistake. So that's maybe another challenge that needs to be addressed. So you see there are some challenges that we need to tackle as an industry, especially in the whole balance between, man versus machine.
Yeah. Let's let's talk a little bit about further technology disruptions that are taking place in our industry. Customer expectations are changing tremendously. How do you feel the language industry should be adapting to those changing customer expectations? What can they do in the short run?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think more than talking about customer expectations, I feel that we should ask ourselves a very important question: what is quality rather than customer expectation, right? And quality is something, and even customer expectation, it depends on many variables. It depends on the content type, it depends on the use case, it depends on the client, it even depends on the stakeholder in the process. The CEO will have a different opinion about quality than the human linguist. The CEO wants to save a couple of bucks here and there, whereas the human linguist wants to convey the message perfectly into the target language. I feel if we want to meet customer expectations, the first thing that we have to do is stop looking at quality as something where we try to get every dot and every comma right. That's not quality in localization. Quality means how well does my localized or my multilingual content perform? What are the results that I'm able to generate with my localized content? And that's the important question that needs to be asked and answered if you want to meet your customers' expectations.
Should we be switching to outcome-based objectives instead of?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think outcome is the right word here. And I've had this conversation quite often the last couple of weeks, and I always give the same example. Imagine you're a global company and you have this very big website, and only 30% of your website is high traffic content. Then the translation of that 30% needs to be a piece of art delivered by a human, period. Right? And the human needs to be compensated accordingly for that work, for that effort. But that 70% of low traffic content, you're not going to invest millions of dollars in the translation if a quick and dirty machine translation might also do the job, right? That's outcome. That's probably the definition of meeting customer expectations.
Yeah. And of course, there's a lot of emerging markets nowadays, languages that we haven't maybe dealt with on a regular basis in the past, but economies are flourishing in those regions now too. Do you think Crowdin plays a special role in supporting that kind of an effort, in your opinion?
Crowdin, given the approach that they have towards implementing AI, yes, I think they can play an important role in, doing business in emerging markets. I think the interesting thing nowadays is that with this new technology, with LLMs, we are capable of doing something that we've never been capable of doing with, for example, traditional machine translation models. We can personalize the outcome of what we're producing with our technology, right? If you're translating a piece of content and your target audience is a group of C-level executives, you can talk to your model and say, look, this is my target audience. Please resonate with them. But you can translate the exact same piece of content for a group of 5-year-old children. And that's a test I do quite often myself. It works. It will do that. And again, this is not limited to text, right? We should look beyond text. You can adapt images to India or Japan or whatever. So nowadays, the technology is super versatile. And I'm never ever going to say that what they produce is going to be perfect and that there's no need for a human in the loop. But personalizing localized experiences is something that is possible nowadays. And isn't that what localization is all about? Speaking the language of your target audience, literally and metaphorically. I think beautiful times are coming up.
Yes. Speaking of customization efforts, let's talk about some additional technologies that potentially can get us to a more personalized experience. AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality were the buzzwords a couple of years ago. The metaverse has kind of dropped off a little bit in its development. Do you think there's still potential for those technologies to make a comeback and be implemented in a different way, or have we shot over the target a little bit?
So I'm not necessarily an expert in the field, but I have been involved in a couple of projects, especially in the pandemic. Of course, that's where they became popular. I saw very good use cases. I saw a company that implemented virtual reality to train people in China, wherever they were, on heavy machinery. And I was pretty impressed by the things that I saw because it was really a matter of bringing together technical documentation and localization and virtual reality. And I was really like, okay, this is going to break through. AR and VR is going to dominate the language industry in the coming years. But then the pandemic was over, and for some reason, the interest in AR and VR also decreased. And then, of course, November 2022, ChatGPT made its big introduction, and all the focus went there. I still see a lot of potential for AR and VR. I think we should not only be talking about Gen AI. So this is probably a call to fellow translation entrepreneurs like, hey guys, there is more out there than just Gen AI. Gen AI is obviously where you have to be today, but there's more out there. There are more disciplines where you can make a difference, where you can make business. And I think AR and VR are still on the table.
Yeah. Some additional technologies maybe that come to mind that we could quickly discuss: voice technology, audio localization. Where are the biggest opportunities for industry to innovate and bring things that are not really common, so to speak, nowadays?
Well, the dubbing market is on fire. Of course, there are so many dubbing providers out there, which means something.
A lot more automated there, though, right? Is that correct?
A lot more automated, a lot more tool providers that support end-to-end processes. So we start from a video and we end with a video. That market is on fire. I see people, businesses raising money. I see people building their own models. I see companies who are able to implement intonation and emotion in their dubbing. So that market is on fire. I think here my call to the language industry would be like, hey guys, don't lose sight of those technologies because they are going to a specialized, niche within our industry, and the TMS market, other language specific companies might lose a little bit of market share. So watch out. I'm always a little bit disappointed when I'm in my TMS and I have a video localization project and I'm not able to start that project from my video file. I find that a little bit disappointing. I find that shocking. I think we should spend more time and attention to speech to text, text to speech, and follow what is happening there closely.
How can platforms like Crowdin adapt to all these disruptive technologies in the best way, you think?
Well, I think Crowdin is already in a very good position to adapt and adopt. One of the things that I like about Crowdin is the Crowdin store. If I have a problem in Crowdin, I just go to the store and I always find a solution there. That means something. That means that Crowdin is very flexible when it comes to integrating new technologies. It has kind of a Salesforce thing going on. And I think Crowdin is clever enough to do that with those other technologies as well, speech technologies. Or maybe another example, something that's your bread and butter, knowledge graphs. I'm pretty convinced that Crowdin will be pioneering knowledge graph support in TMS. They're very quick. Whenever there's a new feature, new model, they just integrate it. And they don't seem to care a lot about productizing it and pricing it. They just want to integrate it and give access to it to their users, a philosophy that I really, really support.
Yeah, I might or might not know something about that, but it's not my interview. So let's talk about sustainability and localization for one quick second. What role does automation play in reducing resource use and localization, in your opinion?
Well, that's a good question. It's not my bread and butter either. But of course, if you automate a process, then you know upfront the amount of tools and technologies and servers that will be involved, right? I know that calling APIs isn't probably the most sustainable practice because you're talking to servers, sending data, getting data back. But at least when you automate something, you know upfront what is going to be involved in the process. Whereas if you're doing a manual process, you do not know, right? A file might originate from a Google Drive and then end up in a Microsoft Office 365 environment, and someone opens that document and throws it into ChatGPT, which we all know is not very sustainable, and then it gets emailed to somebody with 75 persons in CC. I don't think that's more sustainable than just automating it. So I'm a big fan of automation if you do it with a clear vision, with a clear goal, not recklessly, but yes, please automate responsibly, but as much as possible.
Yeah, you're very clearly a very forward-thinking person in the localization industry, and what everybody is thinking about, whether they are businesses or individuals, is how they can prepare for the future and future industry disruptions. What do you do personally, Jourik, to make sure you're ready for the future, and what advice can you give our audience to get ready for the future, both as a business and an individual?
So, first of all, I mean, I think we need to realize and accept that we are dealing with a technological revolution. You know, GenAI and LLMs are here to stay, and we need to adapt. That must be clear. You know, if you don't follow the market, eventually it will kick you out. That's what a lot of businesses need to remember now. The thing with LLMs is that, you know, in our industry, we are very used to task-specific technology. Machine translation, text goes in, text comes out. Speech to text, speech goes in, text comes out. With LLMs, we can do a lot more, but we kind of have to build the use cases ourselves, right? We need to prompt, we need to customize, we need to fine tune, we need to do this, and we need to do that. That requires appropriate tooling, that requires appropriate processes, that requires appropriate expertise. And I don't think that a lot of companies are quite there yet, which may sound negative, but it's completely logical, of course. So first of all, what I would like to recommend to everybody is today's today to invest in engineering capabilities, because LLMs, you have to customize them, right? You have to build the use case yourself. There's a very big open source community. Meta open sources everything. There's Hugging Face where you can find all kinds of interesting models, but they are not polished products. They come with Python SDKs, they come with APIs, and it's up to you to integrate that. So if you're serious about implementing GenAI, LLMs, and build tailored, targeted use cases, you will need to get your hands dirty, and engineering capabilities are step number one. So I think that's the best possible advice I can give right now. Engineering is more needed than ever. Don't hesitate to invest in engineering capabilities.
Yeah. What are your recommended training and upskilling programs to help teams stay competitive? What experience do you have with that?
Well, the first one is a usual suspect, prompting.
Okay.
I used to say that prompting is an overrated discipline. I have to change, or I had to change my mind. It's not. Every dot and every comma in a prompt is important. It's not a matter of writing a prompt and then go with the flow. No, it's a matter of trial and error. You need to try and test and go back to the prompt, etc., and so on. There are very knowledgeable people in our industry who offer prompting courses, so I think that would be a very recommended training program to follow. And then, of course,
And you don't
circling
have
back
you
to
don't necessarily have to have a technical background in order to get knee deep in that. So there's a certain democratization aspect to this. Wouldn't you agree?
absolutely, absolutely. Circling back to my comment on the human linguist, no one is better positioned to write prompts. Everyone can write a prompt, basically. But yes, there are a couple of things that you must learn and follow and respect. So prompting, that would be a very important one nowadays. Second, circling back to my previous answer, engineering capabilities. If there's a little Python course out there, take it. You know, you need to understand the basics of coding, you know, variables, loops, if statements, and that kind of thing. And once you understand that, you will be able to maybe craft your own little workflow or your own little agentic workflow. But it starts with the basics. So again, engineering capabilities more important than ever. If you have someone in your team who is technical and wants to learn, have that person take a Python course or whatever coding course.
Jourik, thank you so very much for letting us tap into your localization insights this morning or this afternoon where you are. I really, really enjoy talking to you every time I have you on. I've had you on lots of things in the past,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we will connect again in the future. Thank you very much for joining us today here in Agile Localization, and we'll talk to you soon again.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to learn more about how leading companies are managing their multilingual content efficiently, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Thank you for tuning in. For more resources on how to streamline your localization process, visit crowdin.com. See you next time.